2 times in 1 week?
Yeah, yeah. These big records.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Thank you, right.
And then, so you are on the, which board, which 537, 537?
537 used to be where everything Harbor Boulevard west,
Okay,
out and then went up north.
got it.
And when city took over RE 90, we had that big fight.
Yeah,
West Sacramento portion of 537 went into
okay.
Just water, it's not like the.
in the Elkhorn area. There were 2 other reclamation districts. Combined
Yeah,
them
'cause
all
we
into
have a
537.
Okay,
So there's one district up there now.
got it.
West Sacramento
Morning.
portion went
Good
into
morning. Good morning.
So,
But,
RD 537, you have separate meetings for that?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you have staff?
We have one part-time person as general manager,
Okay,
and rest. We got some pretty active trustees, a lot of stuff. property owner or ranch, farmer owned,
Okay.
run type of thing.
Yeah,
Although we don't provide any water, it's just strictly
yeah, because
like 900.
yeah, because RD 900 met yesterday, and we're talking about a project, and because I wear so many hats,
Yeah.
kind of putting them together on who's responsible for what at what part of the process. And so RD 537 has land in the subbasin. There,
Well, yeah, it's well, let's just wait till 25. We're just something to cover that area. Just like the reclamation district down in Parks, they're the representatives. So she reads off all the reclamation districts. Some of them still provide her. A lot of them don't
Okay.
supply any water.
and then do you think most of the representatives are staff or board members? Like,
Most. Dave,
yeah,
I think like the alpha winners is,
yeah, Winters is council member, and then Supervisor Sandy.
yeah, I think
I'm wondering who in the room are subject matter expert, because because our makeup is a little different with RD 900. If 537, if it's property owners, hypothetically even a farmer, for example, and you're on the board, you would be a subject matter expert on subbase. So me, I'm not, and so there's a lot of education that has to be done so that I feel with the decisions we're making.
ever any questions.
Yes, she and I sat down and chatted.
Very good.
Yeah.
As long as they leave us all alone, gotta work out, what country
Yeah.
we gotta make administrative decisions. But I'm over on the west side, up north. Got projects, they got on them themselves, and that's going. Morning.
Good morning.
You want to interrupt the
No
conversation?
problem.
Okay. I do have to be out of here at 10 o'clock. I've got to get to work.
Okay, well, then we're gonna start. Greg, gonna get going in 30 seconds. Let me know when we're live, Jen. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September 19th, 2024 meeting of the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. We'll start the meeting as usual with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, the Republic stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll start our meeting today as usual with a presentation from the public on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone here today who wishes to address the board? Seeing none and having no written correspondence, we'll move on to item 1B, our monthly and year-to-date review of revenue and expenses. Jen.
Good morning, members of the board and staff. I'll be reporting out on the revenue and expenses for the month of July 2024. In Fund 870, the beginning balance was approximately $8.82 million. There was no revenue, and for expenses, 1.5 million was transferred from Fund 870 to 871. And so that makes the ending cash position for Fund 870 at approximately 7.32 million. The beginning balance of Fund 871 was 10.94 million, and the revenue was the 1.5 million transfer from Fund 870. And expenses were approximately 97.6 thousand, making the ending position at 12.35 million. Looking at the year-to-date position, the cash position is approximately at 44.67 million, and as of September 10th, it's at 44.53 million. So finance is still closing out the books. They're transferring money here and there from Fund 870, 871, and that is anticipated to be completed in October. That concludes my report. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
No.
All right. We'll move on to our consent agenda, which consists of a contract amendment for Mark Thomas for survey work and approval of our August 15th, 2024 meeting minutes. Any questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 4, SQRA presentation.
Morning, Director Ramos and other directors of the other members of the board. I'm going to try to give you a presentation on the semi-quantitative risk analysis. This is, we spent 3 full days with the Army Corps of Engineers and the risk cadre, which is out of the Louisville district, a couple of weeks ago. 2 PMs ago, two project managers ago, we had negotiated with the Army Corps to have the risk cadre do an overall kind of system analysis of the levees that protect the city. They do this through a number of means, and I'm going to walk you through some of that today. I'm going to talk a little bit. There's a number of experts, geotechnical experts in hydraulic engineering. I'm going to walk you through kind of some of the items that they've reviewed and how they come up with this, and then we're going to go through a single failure mode analysis event decision tree, and then so that you can understand kind of how they go about determining whether or not the risk is significant, severe, or catastrophic. So I won't be using those words. So how we get this started is that there's a significant document review. Document reviews go back from the GRR, our PIR, the preliminary investigative report, our alternative analysis. There's a significant amount of data sharing. As you know, there's been a lot of studies that have been conducted along the reaches throughout Sacramento. They take all that information and they put that into a number of different models. Some of the models are related to water surface elevations, seepage and stability, erosion, and then ultimately breach scenarios. We go through an evaluation of the potential deficiencies. We remove study areas that are seen that are no longer needed because they've already been improved and constructed. And then we go through the actual development of potential failure modes analysis. Oops. That's going to be confusing. So what I'd like to introduce, this first slide, this shows the north and the south basin. This was really early on in the process, in the Wsafca process. This was work that was conducted both with city staff as well as DWR. What you can see here is that many areas of the system have significant deficiencies, and I particularly draw your attention to Southport on the right-hand side, where you see multiple colors indicating that there are deficiencies related to seepage and erosion, and in some cases freeboard.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that slide real quick?
I-
Purple. Okay, thank you.
So this slide shows, these are the seepage issues that were present before any of the early implementation projects that took off in the 2000s. You can see there are seepage issues along the Sacramento bypass, behind Bright Park, in the Washington neighborhood where we are presently doing investigations, the Southport levee, the port levees, both north and south, Deepwater Ship Channel levee, and the Yola Bypass levee where we completed work last year. What I want to show also in this particular slide in regards to seepage, there's only been limited number of reports of seepage issues in the north area. And the areas highlighted in yellow are where we've done fixes already to remove those problems, those deficiencies to the system. Just so your orientation, so you can see north is facing to the left. This is West Sacramento on its side. You know, it's not fully oriented. And what I wanted to point out here is look at the column, the second to the last column to the right, the levee reach. You'll see that these are areas, these were erosion sites going counterclockwise. They start in F. They go up to K, up to J. And there's another one over here in L. And then you'll see that from O all the way to S, there are a number of issues that were identified early on in the process. However, over time, or since we built the Southport setback levee, all of these sites have been eliminated both for erosion problems as well have been mitigated for the underseepage deficiencies that were evident earlier in one of the earlier slides that I presented. So the Southport levee contains a cutoff wall as well as seepage berms to try to deal with any other problems with the underlying strata that was causing some of those issues to the city previously. So this slide also is from the early stages of the West Slip program. Height deficiencies were noted in the rivers near the Broderick boat ramp and where CalSTRS is now located, and at Stone Locks. It should be noted here that this particular slide was taken when we were looking to design to the 200-year flood event plus 3 feet of freeboard. That standard is being modified as we speak, or as we've been going forward. Some of the new design surface elevation are based upon probability and not just on a certain water height plus freeboard. So we're moving away from a deterministic approach to design and more towards a probability of keeping the structures in place so that they're providing the necessary level of protection.
Paul, are they taken into account the improvements that Wsafca is doing as far as the potential water level in the Sacramento River? Yeah,
so a couple of things that we've been finding out recently is that, in fact, what we used to call the 200 plus 3, now, if you look at the same flows, and because of the expansion of the weir and the ability to control flows out of the Folsom Dam, that it appears that some of the designs are now able to withstand a 325-year event instead of just a 200-year event. And that's all relevant. That's all based on the fact that there's been improvements upstream.
May I ask a question? Earlier when you showed the north and south basins, the levees, including the Lake Washington and everything in the turning basin, had measurements along them. But in this picture, there's no measurements there. Is there a reason for that? It makes sense what I'm asking.
It totally
It
makes
does.
sense what you're asking, and I'm going to say that this evaluation did not include the Deepwater Ship Channel or the port levees.
Why?
I don't have, that I can't answer today. I could figure that out, but I don't have an answer for you.
Well, I'm not sure that the Corps had completed the hydrology that H&H study that included the ship channel, where they did complete it for along the Sacramento River. And so that may be why can't really evaluate overtopping yet.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to add, if you don't mind, Paul, that 325 water surface elevation plus a little bit of freeboard is the basis for the design now on Sacramento River North. So we are designing the reaches along the Sac River to a higher standard than we had originally anticipated. Right.
So all of that was by way of background, just to kind of give you an orientation to some of the different ways that the levees and the system has been evaluated over time. When we move into the potential failure mode analysis, we're specifically looking at types of erosion and seepage, and some of the, which are some of the principal deficiencies of Wsafca's or the city's levees. This is due primarily to the manner in which the levees were constructed and because of their age. Riverine erosion, you can see here, occurs along the shoreline or below. It can cause a levee to slip and potentially lead to a breach. Backward erosion piping is another type of seepage and erosion that where it finds a favorable seepage path that could result in the collapsing of the crown and therefore causing a breach and overtopping. A concentrated leak erosion is the effect of water eroding around where there may be trees, rocks, or other perforations in the levee slope or at the levee shoreline. And overtopping, as it sounds, is when water flows overcome the crest of the levee, and this usually happens in combination with another levee failure. It would be a significant storm event that would cause overtopping without another breach. So, want to introduce, this is the event tree that the Corps uses to evaluate whether or not this is a potential failure mode or not. The RID uses this to determine the probability of each node in the event, and through discussion and evaluation of the model inputs and experience, we move from one node to the next to determine whether or not this is a significant breach scenario that needs to be addressed. In this graphic, you can see that this is not uncommon for some of the West Sacramento levees, especially in the north area or along the Bridge District. You can see that there's an embedded levee within an overbuilt levee. To the left, you can see the water level at the 200-year flood event. And then as you if you follow the embedded levee prism towards the water, you'll see that at some point that there's a location where it has eroded away, and this is the beginning of a potential problem that would have to be addressed when the water level goes down. Further slumping could occur because of that potential erosion, which ultimately could lead to a failure. So, to conduct this particular mode analysis, they chose this location. This is in the north area. You may recognize this is in Washington. This is being evaluated because of how narrow it is, the levee at this location, and how close the river actually comes up to the levee relative to the other areas within the Sacramento North levee area. This is just a kind of a passing piece. This is just the north area that we're talking about. The area that's circled in red is the area that's under discussion. You can see that there's been a number of places where revetment, that's rock placement, has been completed to control for erosion, beginning up at the Sacramento Weir, and a significant amount of work that was done down by Sac Bank, which you can see in orange.
It's also the location of the new bridge.
That's correct.
That's, I assume there'll be some work done.
So they were already questioned, based on this photograph, there was some question about whether or not there was already some scour that had already began here. Was there revetment here previously? It's hard to tell, but you can see that on either side there is rock placement. I also want to remind you that this is also the same location where fairly close to the confluence. That has a direct effect on how the levees respond to the water pressures that come from that additional flows. And let me just also point out at this time that when it comes to looking at the potential failure modes, they're looking at a very significant flood event, a 200-year or better flood event. That's how you are able to determine whether or not it is actually a potential for a catastrophic failure. So I'm going to share one geotechnical slide with you, one sciencey slide. And here the point is to emphasize that you can see this would be very typical for what we would find in the Washington area, where we have sand and silty sand towards the crown of the levee. We see different strata of that silty sand. Then it gets into a very sandy layer below that. You see it's sandy first and then comes across gravel and then ultimately to clay. So that's important because a lot of times when there is a need for a wall, they have to look for a clay layer to tie into. This was one of the questions I believe that Norma had at the last meeting. So this kind of emphasizes like how deep the wall would have to be to actually find that clay layer. This is also evaluated because the sand and silty sands, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not they have the necessary cohesiveness and the ability to withstand some of the hydraulic forces when they are persistent. Like I said, these storm events are the 200-year plus events, and so we're anticipating that the river levels remain high and that the levees are loaded with water for an extended period of time. So going through the event tree, first of all, we look at the first event node. Hydraulic modeling for this area, as I was saying earlier, is very complicated because of the river confluence. And like I said, the weir would be open, which changes the flow rates. One of the discussion points that was happening here is that because of the weir opening, there's a certain stabilization that happens with the water, and the velocities are much slower than if the weir wasn't already open. That reduces some of the what's called shear stress on the levee slopes, and so less erosion is likely to occur. There are models that the Corps uses also to determine how does vegetation interact with those flows. And the interpretation you can see here is that the amount of grass and the amount of grass really has an effect on whether or not on how erosive the water forces would actually be. Sorry, I guess that was my second science slide. So in node 2, we have the embankment erosion initiation. We're trying to, it's noted here as I showed you in that picture, maybe that picture wasn't revealing all that much, but you saw trees and you also saw that there's a kind of a limitation of the amount of grass there. There's not a whole lot of vegetation there. So there is concern that those shear stresses could actually start eroding the embankment. Again, kind of looking both at the graphic as well as the aerial photography, we note that there are trees along the shoreline in a number of different places. This can be potentials for failures. This is an example of that concentrated leak erosion that I spoke about earlier. In the lower graphic image, you see that the water level is up near the crest of the levee, and that the tree on the levee has fallen. creating a scour hole at the base of the levee. And just not to be deceiving, this this graphic includes a cutoff wall, and that's not the emphasis of this slide.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
On the failure sketches, the second level of green, I see silty sand, sandy silt, and sand. Are those 4 different things? You guys are giggling, but
They are.
it's 4 different things? Okay. Learn something new every day.
I'm not, and I've only touched on like 2 of the parameters in geotechnical. I've talked about cohesion, but there's a number of other ones that have to do with how much water can it contain, how much water would flow through it, how much, permeability versus erodibility, those sorts of things. So it is a science unto itself, and that's why we hire consultants. So the next mode for analysis has to do whether or not intervention is possible. As I showed you in the previous graphic, that tree is underwater, and when it falls down, you don't see that root fall because all it's doing is created a scour hole. So at this point, the team kind of discussed this and said, I'm not sure that we're able to intervene. And then you consider that this is going to be a high water event, and there's going to be other things happening throughout the system about where there may be backups from internal drainage or other people trying to leave the city. There's also a question about if this is happening waterside, do you actually have to do a fix from the riverside? And how would you do that during a storm event? So intervention seems probably not likely during the event. So the risk cadre is working on both sides of the river. This is taken out of the Wsafca SQRA session. And kind of what I was just saying, there would be a little chance to be able to intervene because most of the deficiency is happening below the water, at least at the time during the high water events. So probably not, you wouldn't get there soon enough to be able to actually do anything.
Yep, Paul, and just by way of example, along the American River, some years ago, when it was a relatively high water event, when the water levels receded and they curtailed the flows out of Folsom and such, they found a number of pretty significant erosion sites that they were really surprised at how severe they were, and nobody had any idea because it was all below the water surface. And so it prompted some modifications to their project to address those erosion deficiencies sort of real time after their project was approved and they were not expecting to do work in those areas.
So the last node is evaluating whether the erosion progresses so much that the crest actually fails and there's a breach. So discussing the types of materials that the levees are made out of, how past performance plays into the discussion and evaluation, and the fact that this particular area hasn't been improved, and it's seen 4 significant events that we can count on in the last 10 to 20 years. It was thought that this probably would not be a failure mode. Not that it doesn't need a repair, not that it doesn't need to be paid attention to, but it's probably not a failure mode. Ultimately, that's where the team landed. So here's just some of my concluding observations from the 3 days. There is a particular concern about the fact that an event this large may need or require evacuations. And it's not just to West Sacramento, but this would be a regional evacuation. This would not be a localized event, but likely a larger event. And what coordination do we have with our neighbors across the river? So I brought that to the attention of the EOC coordinator, just because I think it's important to talk about how do we do evacuations and how do we look at it from a regional perspective.
The Yolo County EOC?
Well, you talked to Brian Johnson internally.
Oh, ours, okay.
The other one that I shared with you is that some levee deficiencies may not be noticed until the water's already gone down, just what Greg was saying. And so that was kind of like yeah, I never really thought, didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that because we're always looking at like, what does the landside slope look like? Is it okay? Is it sloughing? Is there anything else that we see happening? So, so that was kind of a little bit of an aha. And then the last one that got repeated a number of times going through various failure modes was the fact that even if there's a failure for this size of event, it is more than likely that the port north and south levees would already, or the port north for sure would be overtopped. And that the south levee would also be showing a lot of stress because there are certain areas that are fairly low. And that is not within the reclamation district's purview to maintain. It still belongs to the port. So just another piece of information that I was able to get that I kind of walked away from after spending 3 days with this group of experts.
And that's based on the current status of our levees, the deep water channel levees.
It's based on two things. One is the deep water ship channel water elevation would rise to the same level that it is down at Prospect Slough. So it took me a long time to get my head around this idea because it's so far away, 19 miles down, down the deep water ship channel. But as the whole water rises, just like you think about a bathtub, that deep water ship channel water is also rising, and it's just slowly migrating up into the turning basin.
Yeah, and that's the very reason why our project contains improvement of the deep water ship channel west levee for approximately 20 miles.
When you have an event that size, is there still tidal influence? Or is it just so much water that...
I would
the
say
tidal
there
influence
is.
gets muted.
Gets wasted, yeah.
Yeah, Norma.
I have a question. So years ago, I remember looking at Sacramento Bee that was carrying the article. They were talking about if there was a breach of levees. West Sacramento would be pretty safe. We'd only go like maybe a foot under. Pocket area would be 30 feet under. Done that. I mean.
Yeah, I can. Some of the breach scenarios show that, water migrates different ways. So from the port, most of that water starts migrating in a southerly direction. As we get to where Jefferson hits the city limits, that's some of the lowest elevation in the city, and I think we've seen water depths, if there was an actual breach or a catastrophic event, would be in the 10 feet to 12 feet range is what I recall. If there was a breach in the north, it seems like generally it's spreading from east to, well, depending on where it is, but generally east to west. The western part is lower elevation, and that also achieves, I don't remember, 8 to 10 feet if there was a real breach. That was unattended to, right? Unattenuated.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a good session. I presented to you in 20 minutes what we would spend a whole day on.
I mean, you showed us that one location, but were there other locations that they went through the same process?
Yeah, so Port South, if you look at old maps of West Sacramento, the south part, the turning basin is kind of orients to the north part of the channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look to the south, there's also this area that kind of looks like an old scour area. So that was evaluated. There's a lot of clay there, so it wasn't seen as it's still seen as a deficient area, but the clay kind of keeps everything in place because it's able to hold a lot of the water. But overtopping around the port is still a significant issue. What was the third? We did 3 scenarios. I'm trying to think of what the other one was. Oh, the other one was similar to this, similar location. What happens on the land side? So if there's a slough, We start seeing the slough, can we get there and remediate it? And so generally, the thought was that when we have the ability to actually identify some of that slumping happening early in the process, that intervention is possible. And so that was kind of the outcome for that particular failure mode. But generally speaking, if it's happening on the land side and there aren't other emergencies happening, there's a potential to be able to have a successful intervention.
Real quick, so how do you figure this? Is it all visual? I mean, you have to go out there and see it, or do you have monitors that are able to determine if this is happening?
There's my monitor.
It has to be visual,
No.
okay.
Like in early '23, January of '23,
Okay.
we were out inspecting levees, and really you're looking on the land side or green on the water side
There-
also, but it's visual.
Okay, you don't have any tools that would monitor something like that, any type
No,
of?
other than they do have monitoring stage gauges at bridges, so we know the water level
Okay.
in the rivers.
All right, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You had your concluding observations, but with all of the data that was collected and after your session, what do we do with this information?
Yeah, so it fits in, so that's factored into our team, our design team, then kind of says, all right, what do we need, what are we designing for? If we know that this is not the failure mode, are there things that we still need to do to prevent this from happening? So presently at this particular location, they're looking at how do they fortify the levee prism at that location. So it has a direct implication to contemporary design.
Okay, and so you mentioned some areas that had deficiencies. Are those being addressed, or was that just, looked at the study level?
I'm not following exactly.
And I could have the terminology wrong, but I think in an earlier slide, there was some areas that I thought you had mentioned that there were deficiencies.
Yeah, so what I was trying to emphasize in those early slides is like, these are all the information, this is all the evaluative information that was provided to the team. And what I also tried to show you over time is that through the EIP projects that were completed, we were able to remediate or mitigate for many of those deficiencies.
Okay.
And so now we're kind of looking at these some of them are what I would call pinch points, small locations where there still appears to be a potential for a failure. And so we need to kind of take it, kind of like I said, this particular location where the levee is fairly narrow, the water has been up against the levee for particular periods, for a long period of time. We need to recognize that in the future could have a problem, or the fact that there are trees along the shoreline. These are all the issues that we kind of talk with the Corps about in terms of how do we reduce the potential for a catastrophic event.
And Paul, would it be fair to characterize the SQRA as a probabilistic analysis?
Yeah, that's right.
More than a technical, strictly science-based analysis. So the other thing that goes on when we're going through design is there's a lot of and the basis, primarily the basis for design is based on water surface elevation and flow, and then the geotechnical analysis. You saw those graphs. Well, there's a whole lot of work that goes on in the lab to determine how much water does it hold, what happens with rapid drawdown when the river level goes down, what's the seepage gradient that comes out the other side through these various analyses they do. And the primary remediation measures are based on those specific analyses that are performed all along the reach that we're improving or looking at improving. So this was a different look at it from a probabilistic focus, and do they converge or not?
Okay, that's actually really helpful, like theoretically why we do this. Appreciate
Sometimes
setting
things
that.
converge, sometimes they don't.
Okay,
But the underlying geotechnical science is really what drives whether or not we're going to be making improvements or the levee's good as it is.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Very good.
Wait, just for the report.
Okay, we'll move on to our West Sacramento project updates.
Thank you, Chair Ramos, board members. I'll be fairly brief. And thank you, Paul. That was a really nice presentation. on some pseudoscience. Just as a reminder to the board, I think it was last month or probably maybe the month before, you had approved an amendment for River Partners to do some additional planting. And that work is going to start next week, the week of September 23rd. So if you happen to be out there and you see some activity, that's what's going on. On the federal project and funding, we are not aware that the Corps has received the FY24 funding yet. The end of the fiscal year is the end of this month. We do expect that they're going to get it, but just as a reminder, the cash payment that they will request once they receive their appropriation will come shortly thereafter. We expect it to be about 2.6, 2.7 million. Since last time, we had submitted our work-in-kind package number 15 for about $377,000. So the total work-in-kind submitted to date is about 6.3 million. I think in the packet it says 5.9, a little bit more than that now. On the Yellow Bypass East Levee or Yebble North project, all of the landside work is essentially complete. I think grades, final grade has been established or very close to it. They've begun the degrade over the top and water side for placement of pipe for the discharge from the pump station. So that work's ongoing. And then on the Sacramento River North levee, we received the 30% design on time from the Corps. It was about 10 days ago. I forget the date, but it was Friday the 3rd of September, something like 6th of September. So we have till the 25th, I believe, to compile our comments and submit back to the Corps. And then lastly, a couple of administrative updates. I just wanted to let the board know that our secretary, Jen, has been promoted to analyst. So congratulations, Jen.
Congratulations.
Filling in behind Mark Zolo. And then I also want to let the board know, if you haven't heard already, I'm retiring at the end of the year.
Congratulations.
And so, thank you. And there's a recruitment getting underway now for replacement. And then lastly, the flood division, which currently resides in the city manager's office, just due to span of control primarily, and that we're also primarily focused on construction now, the division's going to move to the capital projects department, effective the first of the year. So, yep, that concludes my comments, and happy to answer any other questions. Oh, the other attachments to the packet, cost share tables, the only change was that last work-in-kind submission that I mentioned, so you'll see a little bit change from last time. And then other than that, we have not met with the Corps' leadership board, the PLB. So I did include the slides from the Corps, but they're exactly the same as last time, no change. But they're there for your reference.
Director's comments. Greg, were we going to address our having a meeting in October?
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. And I'll check with council. Well, we'll post, okay. Assuming the board, there's no objection to canceling the meeting in October, we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll just post the notification just so everybody's aware of it.
So no meeting in October, we'll have a meeting in November, and then would we have a meeting in December? I'm thinking of when your last meeting would be.
It will either be November or December.
Okay, we'll know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Any other comments?
No.
Hearing none, are adjourned.
Thank you. Right. Bye-bye.